Once upon a time, a wicked troll, the most evil one of all, made a magic mirror. It had a terrible power. Everything good and beautiful reflected in it shrank away to nothing, while everything ugly and bad was magnified and looked worse than ever. The troll's disciples thought this was wonderful and carried the mirror everywhere, laughing as they pointed it at the heavens and the earth. At last, they decided to fly up to the sky to mock the angels and God himself. But as they flew higher, the mirror shook with such gleeful malice that it slipped from their hands and fell to the earth, where it shattered into billions of pieces. These fragments were more dangerous than the whole mirror, for some were no bigger than a grain of sand. When a person got a speck in their eye, they would from that moment see only the bad in everything. And if a piece lodged in a person's heart, oh, dear reader, that heart would turn as cold and hard as a lump of ice. In a large town, two poor children, a boy named Kay and a girl named Gerda, lived in attic rooms next door to each other. They were not brother and sister, but they loved each other just as much. Their families had little boxes on their windowsills where they grew herbs and a beautiful rose bush each. In the summer, they could climb out onto the roof and sit together among the sweet-smelling roses. One winter evening, as snowflakes drifted down, Kay's grandmother told them stories by the fire. "See," she said, pointing to the frost on the window pane. "The white bees are swarming." "And do they have a queen?" asked Kay. "Yes," said the grandmother. "She is the Snow Queen. She flies through the streets on the darkest nights, and her breath forms icy patterns on the window panes." Later that night, as Kay looked out his window, he saw a single, perfect snowflake drift down. It grew and grew until it became a lady, dressed in the finest, glittering white gauze. She was beautiful, but her eyes shone like cold, clear ice. She waved her hand at him and flew away. Kay was frightened and drew back, but for a moment, he thought she was terribly fascinating. Time passed, and it was summer again. Kay and Gerda were sitting amongst their roses when suddenly, Kay let out a sharp cry. "Ouch! Something has pricked my heart, and now I've got something in my eye." Gerda threw her arms around his neck, but he blinked and pushed her away. "You're so ugly, Gerda," he said coldly. "What's wrong with you?" It was a splinter from the troll mirror. One had pierced his heart, and another was in his eye. His kind heart had turned to ice, and he could only see the faults in everything. He tore up the beautiful roses and went home, leaving a weeping Gerda alone. From that day on, he was a changed boy. He mocked Gerda. He mocked his grandmother, and he became obsessed with the cold, perfect beauty of snowflakes. One winter day, Kay tied his little sled to a large, fine sleigh that drove through the square. As it sped up, he couldn't untie it. They flew out of the town gates and into the white world beyond. The snow began to fall thicker and faster. Kay was frightened, but when the driver of the large sleigh turned around, he saw it was the Snow Queen herself. She smiled at Kay, and he forgot his fear. She wrapped him in her furs and kissed his forehead. One kiss would have frozen him, but the second kiss made him forget Gerda, his grandmother, and his home. The third kiss made him not feel the cold at all. He thought she was the most beautiful and clever lady in the world. They flew up into the sky, over forests and lakes, to her palace in the far north, a castle of blinding snow and howling winds. When Kay did not return, everyone believed he was dead. But Gerda's warm heart would not believe it. As soon as spring came, she put on her new red shoes and set out to find him. She went to the river and offered it her shoes if it would carry her to Kay. The river carried her to a garden and a little house with a cherry tree. An old woman with a wide-brimmed hat lived there. She was lonely and used a magic comb to make Gerda forget her quest and stay with her. But when Gerda saw the roses on the old woman's hat, she remembered Kay, and her love broke the spell. She fled the garden and continued her journey. Gerda met a wise crow, who told her a prince in the nearby castle had recently married a princess who came from the wood. Hoping it was Kay, Gerda went to the castle. It was not him, but the young princess and prince were so moved by Gerda's story that they gave her warm clothes, a golden carriage, and a servant to accompany her. But in the dark forest, robbers attacked the carriage. A fierce little robber girl saved Gerda from harm and took her to the robber's den. The robber girl was wild but kind-hearted in her own way. She let Gerda keep her warm muff and gave her a reindeer, the finest and fastest of them all, to carry her to Lapland. The reindeer, whose name was Bay, knew the way to the Snow Queen's palace, for it was his home. He carried Gerda through the frozen north, past the northern lights, until they reached the hut of a wise Lap woman and then a Finn woman. The Finn woman, peering into her steaming kettle, saw the truth. "Little Kay is with the Snow Queen," she told the reindeer. "He thinks he is happy there because he has a splinter of the troll mirror in his heart and a grain in his eye. Until they are removed, the Snow Queen will have power over him. Gerda's own power is greater than any of ours. It is in her pure, innocent heart. She must go to the palace herself." And so the reindeer carried Gerda to the very edge of the Snow Queen's garden. Gerda bravely walked the last stretch alone, through biting winds and armies of snowflakes. She said the Lord's Prayer, and with every word, her breath turned into a little angel that grew and fought the palace was made of driven snow, with 100 halls shaped by the wind. In the very center of the empty, icy castle sat Kay. He was blue with cold, and he was dragging sharp, flat pieces of ice around, trying to form them into a word. The Snow Queen had flown away, telling him, "If you can spell the word eternity with these pieces of ice, you shall be your own master, and I will give you the whole world and a new pair of skates." But he could not do it. Gerda ran to him and flung her arms around him. "Kay, dear Kay, I've found you at last." But Kay sat still, stiff and cold. He did not recognize her. Gerda began to cry. Her hot, bitter tears fell on his chest, and they melted the ice in his heart. He looked at her and burst into tears himself. As he cried, the splinter of mirror was washed from his eye. He looked at Gerda and cried, "Gerda, where have you been? And where have I been?" He looked around at the cold, terrible palace and shuddered. He was free. The spell was broken. Gerda kissed his cheeks, and they bloomed like roses. She kissed his hands, and he became warm. She laughed with joy, and Kay laughed with her. They were so happy that even the pieces of ice around them began to dance. And when they settled, they had formed the word eternity, for Kay had now earned his freedom with the power of Gerda's love. Hand in hand, Kay and Gerda walked out of the ice palace. They found the reindeer waiting, and he carried them back to their home. When they arrived, they found that everything was the same, and they themselves were the same, except they were grown up. The roses were blooming on the roof, and they sat down together in the sunshine, their hearts filled with the happiness of summer, forever safe from the Snow Queen's cold grasp.